Welcome to Cover Book Beat. This is program number 847, and today we've got a real treat for you. I'm your host, Roger Nichols, and in the first in 14 years of interviewing authors, we have a father and son tag team today. Our author today, William J. Carl, a Greek scholar, was a pastor and seminary professor, and then president for decades, living a life that served peace, faith, and society. He wrote 8 successful nonfiction books about religion, traveled the world, lecturing at prestigious schools, and being honored by his alma mater. Now he has changed course, trading in the sleeves of his jacket with patches on them for body armor to become the author of a first-class international thriller about a one-time CIA assassin who left his trade to become a minister, only to be called back to return to his old life to uncover and stop a global terrorist plot, like they all are. It bears the juicy title of Assassin's Notebook, has more twists and turns than a cheap garden hose. With him today is his son, actor David Carl, who did the narration of Assassin's Notebook. Now, in checking his credits in the IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, I highly recommend you look at the collection of clips on the site, including the one where he is opposite Ben Affleck and George Clooney's The Tender Bar. He's also on the final season of The Marvelous Ms. Maisel, was the winner of the New York Fringe Festival Solo Award show for his Gary Busey's one-man Hamlet. The title alone is driving me nuts. And he also played former President Donald Trump in a streaming series and another one-man show called Trump Lear, which begs to be restaged. He's also an expert on international accents, which he does throughout the Audible version of the novel, which is has the model, which moves through several countries. Very pleased to welcome William Carl and David Carl.
Great to be with you today, Roger, and to have son David. David, good to see you there up in Brooklyn.
Good to see you, Dad. This is a nice thing to do today. I've had like a bizarrely busy day with kind of crazy, stressful things, and just to see your two smiling faces is a real nice break. So,
good. It's a Zen moment for you.
What we're going to talk about is it's Assassin's Manuscript. I think you said Assassin's Notebook.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Assassin's Manuscript.
Absolutely.
And 380 pages, and we're looking forward to talking with you today as we wish you a happy 75th birthday also.
Yes.
So people at home can hear that.
Bless your heart. Thank you both so much. And not the bless your heart in the way the Southern people use it, the way I use it, which is it's a genuine bless your heart. Well, we're going to start with William because that's kind of the whole premise here. Most writing courses suggest write what you know. So here we have a minister who was a former secret agent. What did you do before seminary?
You know, it's funny that some people say, okay, this is about a former CIA hitman who becomes a minister in Tennessee, which is where I have retired. Is this autobiographical?
Including me. Yeah. I keep asking him this because I still think it's possible that he was a hitman.
So I always pause and say, well, you know, all writing is autobiographical, and that always makes people nervous. And then I add that in seminary, I actually had 3 years of Taekwondo training, which was an extracurricular course to handle rough parishioners. And I really did have that. So I know how to describe the action scenes in the novel because of my training in Taekwondo. But that's as far as it goes because I've never actually killed anybody or worked for the CIA. But I did a lot of research to learn how to write this kind of novel. One of the other podcast interviews is titled How to Write Like a Killer. And I literally interviewed real live assassins, retired in every case, 4 of them, and the son of one. And I'll tell you a little more about that in a moment. But it's been a fun, possible, exciting research to do this novel. And it took 30 years to get it all done. Wow. Yeah, 30 years.
Is there some kind of wish fulfillment behind this, though? I've almost Taekwondo. I need to use it somehow.
You know, the great thing about Taekwondo is you're trained not to use it unless you are actually being attacked. And so it's a great sense of peace that you know it. it also gives me lots of confidence when I go to New York and visit David, walking down the street. I don't worry. I probably think I know more than I actually know, but
Well, you definitely know more than I do because you took it as an adult, and I'm an 11-year-old red belt, which means I know zip. But he at least has, knowledge from his 30s, so that's maybe it might be useful.
and that was 40 plus years ago. It was actually from my 20s. It was 50 years ago.
Okay.
And by the way, Roger, one thing I want to mention to you at 75, do you realize, and I'm 75, we're halfway through the new middle age? Did you know that?
Is that right? No, my definition of elderly is 15 years older than I am, whatever date that
Yeah,
is.
yeah. Well, I've spoken at Chautauqua up in Western New York, and David's actually been in the theater conservatory at Chautauqua, and you can't get the senior citizen discount at Chautauqua until you're 90. So the new middle age is 60 to 90, and you and I are halfway through. How do you like
Dang. We're in the prime right now.
That's it. That's it.
There you go. Okay, without giving away any spoilers, give us the basics of the plot because it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, it's former CIA assassin was a hitman and becomes a minister. And he comes to Tennessee because there is a woman in this small town who is the fiance. She's a Harvard trained lawyer, and she's the fiance of somebody he killed by accident when he was trying to kill this terrorist in New York City. And he's come to be close to her after he's gone to seminary. All of that is told in flashbacks. And she gets interested in him, which he wasn't expecting. And then she gets caught up in his international intrigue around the Middle East and Rome and lots of places. That's where you hear David doing a lot of different accents on Audible. And to his surprise, she falls in love with him, not knowing that he killed her fiance by accident. So all the way through, you're wondering, I mean, it's this unlikely romance. The reader is wondering, is she going to find out? And when she does, what's she going to do? And in the meantime, he's got to get a manuscript translated to prevent this international disaster. So he has to deliver a manuscript to the Vatican to get it translated, but hidden in code is something terrible that's going to happen in Jerusalem. And he has to try to figure out how to crack the code. So this is a Dan Brown meets Daniel Silva thriller. That's what it is. It's the combination of those two. Just think Indiana Jones and James Bond, or, The Name of the Rose and Jack Ryan and Jason Bourne, all thrown together in one kind of novel.
That's the point I was just going to make. So you did it for me. Thank you so much for getting that in there. This does not read like a first novel. I mean, it's a difference. I'm a nonfiction writer. I've written books and newspaper articles for years, but it's a different skill to do fiction.
Yes.
You had an unusual mentor in making that transition.
Yes, I actually had two. One who suggested that I write the novel in the first place, and that was Alex Haley, the author of Roots, who was sitting in my office one day in Dallas, and I had him to speak at something called the Town Hall Forum. And he said, "Have you written anything?" And I said, "Yeah, I've written a bunch of books." And because I've spoken at Oxford, Cambridge, Princeton, Cornell, Carnegie Mellon, lots of places. And he said, "Well, let me see one of them." So I pulled one off the shelf, which was a set of lectures I'd given at Princeton. And he's sitting and thumbing my book. This is the author of Roots. And he stops and he says, "You need to write a novel." And I said, "What makes you say that?" And he said, "Two things. One, you had to write, and you write really well." This is the author of Roots telling me I write really well. And he said, "Two, you know how to tell a story, and that's all a novel is." And I said, "What would I write a novel about?" He said, "What do you like?" I said, "Tom Clancy and Frederick Forsyth." And he said, "Write one like that." I said, "I don't know anything about any of those things." He said, "Well, you're a Greek scholar. Why don't you combine old manuscripts with espionage and just see what comes out?" And that's what I did. And yes, he was a wonderful mentor, but I also have another mentor, Charles Cornwell, who was the professor of English at Davidson College earlier in his life. And he's the former husband and the editor for Patricia Cornwell in all her novels. and he was my editor through all 12 revisions of Assassin's Manuscript. And on the 12th revision, he said, "It's masterful, get it out there." So I had two great mentors there.
Well, and I have to say, this is unqualified one of the best I've read in a long time. This is the turn the page because you can't forget fast enough what's going on. Yeah. And I won't tell you how late I was up that night, but I, I I will say there's a huge cast of characters in here. And this is interesting thing about that. I mean, you have some people that are mentioned once in one scene. The president's aide de camp, for instance. That's it. Bo, somebody, and it never comes back. What that does is it gives you the feel that there's this huge backstory behind everybody and everything. So I have to ask, some people, authors do create little vignettes about their characters before they write the book. Did you do that?
I did that about practically all of them. The one scene of the aide de camp guy, I don't think I had much backstory for him because he just mentioned once. But yes, this is something I had to learn, Roger, which is I can roll out of bed and write nonfiction books. You probably can too.
Yeah.
But fiction is totally different. And I have to give a shout out to David, who he's right here with us, in the sense that he was 12 or 13 when I first started this thing, and I would feed some of it to him and get his ideas about what he thought about it. And he read several versions of it, even gave me notes. And on the last one, he actually read it. I think, David, you read it on the plane from Brooklyn, from New York to LA or something.
Yeah.
He just read it fast.
Yeah.
And he said, "You got it. It's it. Let's go." And thank you, David, for all your help on the novel.
I mean, it was a pleasure. I think people can imagine what it's like to be 12, and we had a good relationship. So if you have imagine being a 12-year-old with a good relationship with your dad, and your dad says, "Hey, I'm writing this story about a guy who's a preacher after he's an assassin." And then do you want to read it? Of course I want to read it. And then he's going to ask me about it and ask me what I think. I mean, I loved it. So the genesis of this was like, oh my gosh, my dad is so cool, and he's including me on this thing that he's doing while he's doing this whole other full-time job that's definitely more than 40 hours a week, like way more than 40 hours a week. Somehow this man, who's my dad, has energy left to write this book. So it was very inspiring, and it continues to be to this day, because he still has, I think, more energy than I do at 75. And, I'm very much not retired. So anytime I feel a little bummed out or a little pooped, I'm like, right now, my dad is doing something with full energy, and I better get off my butt and do what I need to do.
Well, it's got to be flattering, consider being, consulted as an adult when you're that age. It is
cool.
He entrusted you with this.
It did feel pretty cool. Yeah, that was fun.
Well,
but I do think kids at that age have an interesting perspective. I think they're pretty honest. They're old enough to have some intelligence, and they've read some books, they've watched some movies, and they're honest, So I think it's a smart, good move asking us. You would ask Jeremy too, and I remember, I think it was, I don't know, it was fun. It was a great dad move. I'll give you that.
Well, Jeremy's his older brother, who's a teaching tennis pro in Washington, D.C., and has actually co-authored 2 books himself on tennis. And so we've got some writers in the family, but I want to be really honest that David, through the years, didn't go, "Wow, this is great," every time. There were times when David said, "I don't think you quite got it yet," or "You've got too much going on here. Let's tighten this," or whatever. I mean, he was real honest. He knew from theater how to give notes. And
there's nobody more annoying than a high school, college, or undergraduate theater student, because they really just they're learning these principles of storytelling, and they're just, especially an actor. Good God. I mean, we're the worst. We're so passionate and emotional, and I'm glad I learned a little more tact as I got older, and I'm glad grateful that you wanted the notes. You did ask for them. So, but you know, I just sort of shared what I was learning about storytelling, you know.
And they were great tips. I will say that the first version of the novel was 740 pages, Roger.
Oh,
Yeah, and I took it into a literary agent's office in Dallas and dropped it on. He said, "You nearly broke my desk with that thing. Go take 200 pages out and then I'll look at it." Well, that was like, now it's a good thing I had done a PhD at Pitt in rhetoric and communication, because you learn how to edit, you know, when you do a PhD, or I'd written other books. And so it wasn't like killing your kids or something, you know, you got to give up some stuff. But that's a lot of pages to take out. So a friend, another author, said, learn how to write screenplays, and then you can tighten your story. Well, that's what I did. And it really did tighten it, made it fly faster. And there are reviewers who've said, I practically can see this on screen already, the way it reads. And that's why the short chapters keep it flying. And again, David, with his theater training and his love of movies, was helpful to me on the screenwriting type process. And by the way, I did write a couple of screenplays. I wrote one that won the Telluride IndieFest screenwriting contest and the quarterfinalist in the Nickel and the quarterfinalist the Austin Film Festival. And I turned it into a play that David saw down in Birmingham that raised $30,000 opening night for the Bruno Cancer Fund. And now I'm turning it into a musical, and it's a totally different kind of story. It's a romantic comedy. And David knows a lot, and he gave me lots of good notes about that too. It's called Maggie's Perfect Match.
what's
So,
interesting about that is I write out most of my questions in advance. And here's one I had written up. It says, as I read Assassin's manuscript, I kept getting movie script vibes. I wonder whether having a son who was an actor influenced your style. Obviously, it did, and obviously for the better, I would think.
well, I think so, no question about it. And I am pitching it now through something called Story Rocket, which is a wonderful website, and pitching it to producers and directors in LA, not with the idea of making it into a movie. You've read it, Roger. So
Yeah,
you realize how hard it would be to crunch all of that into
yeah,
one movie,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
No, I'm pitching it as a limited or extended series
Yeah.
like Netflix or Amazon Prime Video, where you could even have multiple seasons. We could write more. David's
Yeah.
talked to me about how to put a pilot together, you know, that kind of stuff. I know how to write a screenplay. I've just never learned how to write a whole series. And, you know, maybe somebody else will do that after they see the book.
Yeah, it's showrunners involved and whatnot. So have you cast this mentally in your head? Do you see who plays who?
Oh, yeah. In fact, on Story Rocket, I've had to come up with names of different people. You know, I could see Liam Neeson as Adam Hunter. I could see him. I could see Brad Pitt or Mark Wahlberg. I've got Charlize Theron in mind for the Rennie Ellis, who is the Harvard-trained lawyer. The Pope, who is a really fun character. A lot of people love the Pope character. And it's amazing. I wrote him 30 years ago, and he's just like Pope Francis today. And I haven't changed a word in the novel. Isn't that interesting?
Eh,
Anyway, I could see Anthony Hopkins doing a great Pope, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
And David's colleague from University of Evansville, Rami Malek, who has won an Oscar, would be a wonderful Bedouin, the Bedouin terrorist, or Tony Shalhoub.
Oh yeah.
That would be a different kind of part for him because he's usually in the comedy,
Yeah.
like Marvelous Mrs. Maisel that David was in last
Yeah.
summer.
Yeah.
And then there are other possible characters. There's the mafia, uh, the Vincenzo Mazzini, who's the Sicilian mafia. I'm going to mess up his last name, David. Chaz Palminteri.
Oh, Palminteri.
Palminteri, yeah. Chaz Palminteri would be perfect for Vincenzo Mazzini. So oh, and then let's see. I had a couple of Hispanic characters, actors for my president of the United States is Victoria Sanchez. the first Hispanic and the first female president. So I'm trying to remember who I put, Jennifer Lopez, or I can't remember. I put a couple of wonderful Hispanic actresses for them. Anyway, yeah, I've thought about some people for the parts.
You know, there's so much going on in this. I have a feeling that this is a world that you've built that you can play in more. Do I feel other stories coming your way?
Yes, but I've been so busy promoting this one, and it took so long to write it that I haven't charged into writing a sequel. I've got a lot of people saying, I want to hear what happens to Adam Hunter and Rennie Ellis next, where's their next adventure? And I have some ideas, and they're pretty wild. And I try to adjust to what's going on in the world. And I'm going to have to wait a while to see how Israel and Gaza are going to play out before I would do anything in that part of the world.
Yeah.
And then, I actually had to go back and edit right before I published because of Russia attacking Ukraine.
Yeah.
I had to edit the Russian section a little bit. And, I like to keep it, try to keep it up to where I am right now in the world. Where is the world right now? So we'll see.
All right. Well, let's switch over to David now. And I want to tell you, I had more fun watching your clips. I have never, ever seen, and I think the world is ready for it, a pink donut singing delivery boy.
That was on Blue Bloods, wasn't it?
That's right. And I want you to tell you, my dad's sister, Evelyn, text message me every time that plays on one of the cable networks that just plays Blue Bloods on repeat. And it makes my day every time she text messages me. I love it. Let me tell you something. Unless you're an incredibly famous actor, as long as you're not trying to eat something, we all love to hear nice things. We all love it. So if you see an actor, you recognize them, and they're not busy, they're probably going to like hearing a nice thing that you say about them. It's certainly Aunt Evelyn texting me. That was a role that when I auditioned for it, it was just a poem, and I made the choice to sing it. So what you hear on that episode, I wrote that melody, and they cast me partially because I made the choice to sing it in the audition. And I genuinely surprised Donnie Wahlberg. He didn't know that a guy was going to come out in a pink donut costume and sing at him. So we got to really surprise him. So that was fun too. It was a very fun day on set. And they still play it.
Hey, there you go. Do you get residuals?
Those are some of the smallest that I get.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but I do get them.
Yeah.
And I can buy things like coffee with them. So that's nice. It's like my coffee money.
Yeah. $1.38 from somebody in Nebraska. It's watched it again. So yeah.
Early on, it was pretty good. Like the first year or two was pretty good.
Yeah. So in all the things you've done, switching to be just a voice actor, have you done voice acting work before you did the Audible for this book?
Voice acting is the most consistent work I've had for the 18 years I've been a professional actor. Thanks to my amazing voiceover agent, Billy Ciro. I mean, many others, but he's the one I've been with the whole time. And he's a wonderful guy who's kept me busy doing voiceovers between everything else that I've done. During the pandemic, it was easy to do. I probably did more during the pandemic than I did any other time because that was what you could do. I mean, I'm feet away. I'm looking at my closet, and that's my little booth, my VO booth, where I did my dad's novel. And I've recorded commercials and animation and all kinds of stuff in there. So yeah, when the world was kind of on fire and you couldn't go out, I could work in my closet, which was nice.
Do you have a favorite that you did that you really, really like, you're very proud of in voiceover work?
I think I have to say it's the Assassin's Manuscript because it was such a workout. I mean, most of the things I do are like maybe take me 30 minutes to do. And that there's a part of that that's nice. But if I want to get artistically, creatively fulfilled, I want something that's a little bit longer than that. I think if you cobble together all the hours, it took me about 4 weeks to do it of, like maybe a 40-hour week. And that was really stimulating. It was incredibly stimulating. It's sort of marathon level in the sense that after I've done that, everything else feels kind of easy. I've done a couple of things like that. I've been to the Edinburgh Fringe. I've done this audiobook and maybe one or two other things that everything else feels easier than that.
Part of James Patterson novels. You've done part of James Patterson.
Right. So during the pandemic, you started seeing tons of multicast, many more multicast audiobooks.
Yeah.
And so I did 3 James Patterson, but just playing like several different parts.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that took like 3 hours to record those,
Yeah.
as opposed to, I guess I just said it, 160 hours to do my dad's. But to do all those characters, also like, I'm probably not going to play an Adam Hunter type character in a movie. If I do, it'll be a funny one. It'll be like a funny action movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so to get to do that, there's great freedom with voiceover. The imagination gets the most stimulating workout it can get, I think, when you're doing voice acting. And the reader gets it too. The audience gets it too. I mean, that's what I think is so cool. I'm imagining something. My dad imagined something when he wrote it, and the reader is imagining their whole, like they've cast it with different people.
Yeah.
They might cast themselves probably in the lead role, or like whatever. So it's this wonderful like imagination dance that happens. And look, is it fun to work on a big set with a big crew and a bunch of extras and cranes and steady cams? Absolutely it is, in a completely different way. But it's also pretty cool to get in your closet and summon up all of those images in people's minds for a lot less money. It costs about $1 million to do a day to do the kind of scene I just described, but it maybe costs, I don't know, a couple hundred to do it just with your voice and a microphone. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Could we get you to do a sample of that for us? Because I think people will be absolutely delighted to hear about it.
Sure. So this is from a section in the British Museum from the chapter Sleight of Hand. And this is when one of the guys comes in who's planning to steal the codex. And he's talking to his coworker, who does not know that he's going to do that. Okay. Instead of going through the front door of the museum to the information booth for check-in, he had to pass by old Arthur Bledsoe in the warder's quarters. Arthur had worked at the museum nearly as long as Nigel had. Morning, Arthur. Morning, Nigel. What's in the bag? Oh, just a present for an old friend, said Nigel. Going to a birthday party after work. So, what's the present? Looks like a big book. Good guess. I'm going to have to make you unwrap it and show it to me, Nigel. He'd never been very good at lying, but for once he felt a calm and said, Arthur, if you can't trust me, who can you trust? Arthur got off his stool and stepped toward Nigel. Come on, Nigel, you know the rules. Don't play games with me. Open the bloody package or I'll have to call security. I am security, said Nigel. Arthur blocked the entrance. Nigel, open that package or you don't go in. Okay, you've got me. He paused for a moment. I didn't want to tell you, but this present is for you. For me? Arthur said, back on his heels. That's right, for you. I didn't want to tell you. Thought I could slip by with a story about it being a birthday present for a friend, but you really did your job and caught me. Oh, I get it. This is a test. Right again, Arthur. You're sharp today. No way to slip anything by old Arthur. Arthur beamed, relieved. So, he said in a little more than a whisper, it's a present for me? Yes, but not too much of a surprise now, I'm afraid. That is, unless... Unless what? Barked Arthur. Unless you act surprised at the party after work. A party? For me? Oh, I can act surprised. We can stop there.
That's bravo indeed. Bravo. You obviously...
Yeah, it's just fun. It's fun. Like when you're a kid imagining being an actor, you're thinking about make-believe. You're thinking, I want to play make-believe for a living. Doing that it's the closest, most distilled version of that. because everything else, you know, there's lots of waiting around, there's lots of sitting, and you know, I love working on film projects and TV projects, but my actual work is pretty short. There's a big crew doing a lot of work, a lot more work than I am, and I just kind of come in and do my thing, and then I go sit in a trailer for 7 hours.
Wow.
So if you want to be stimulated as a performer, if any actors are listening and you haven't gotten into audiobooks or voiceover, I think check it out, because it really scratches the creative itch in a way that can keep you happy between, you know, those big jobs that you're, you know, dream about.
Okay, I have to go back to Dad. Did he ever do anything and you said, oh, that's not the right voice? Come on, he'd do differently than that.
No, his choices were just amazing. And as far as I'm concerned, he makes Assassin's Manuscript a better story than what I wrote, if it's possible. I mean, he literally brings the story to life. And you know, David knows I can be a pretty critical person. I mean, I'm the dad and all that, and this is my book and it's my baby, yada yada. But the truth is, he's a trained actor. I mean, he's got some of the best training in the country. Evansville, University of Evansville, extremely selective. Rutgers, Mason Gross School of the Arts. He's got his master's and his MFA from there. And he's a real pro. That's why I hired him. You know, I didn't hire him just because he's my son.
I also had very specific training because I got to watch you do about 1,000 sermons. And I've watched you at dinner parties tell stories. And so I know probably as good, like Jeremy and Mom and I know the best what you think a good story is. So I had in my head a rhythms, different kinds of rhythms that I'm like, I'm pretty sure Dad will like this. You know what I mean? And the good part of that is you are a good storyteller. So I wasn't using tools that are ineffective. I was using good tools. I've watched you be a good storyteller with lots of different people, whether it's one-on-one telling a story or 1,000 people. You're good at it. So yeah, I had the edge in that sense, that I don't know anyone else would have had that information except Mom or Jeremy. They're the only ones that have that much exposure.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way. But you have a flypaper mind, and in the sense that everything sticks to you. You don't forget anything. You're like a sponge. I mean, it's kind of amazing. And you just soak it up and you know it and you remember it. So to answer your question, Roger, I never once questioned any of his choices. They were amazing. They were beautiful.
We did go through at the beginning, and because I talked to other people who had done, this was actually my first full audiobook. So I talked to some friends who have done many, and they all do some initial conversations going through each character, and giving a sample of what we're thinking. So we talked about everything in advance.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it felt like there wasn't a lot of back and forth. It seems like you were pretty into my ideas, which obviously as an artist feels very nice, you know, to have that kind of room. Yeah. So yeah, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to be treated with kind of, here you go. Yeah. I trust you. Trust is such a valuable gift to give someone. And it was definitely given in high volumes on this project. So I had a blast, even when it was very hot in that closet last July and I was sweating just reading, probably, I think, like some of the teen chapters, those, you can imagine me in August and July, just a lot of sweat.
You recorded yourself with video and audio, and you either put it on Instagram or TikTok, an action in a helicopter that's pretty wild. I thought, wow, did I write that? That's pretty wild.
It is pretty crazy to be in a tiny space and getting that animated. That those the big action scenes, my adrenaline would start pumping and I'd really get into it. And sometimes I'd worried I'd knock the door off the closet because I was so pumped up. uh, but for some reason, those were my favorite. Just the narration of the action sequences. I really got energized by those.
Yeah. So there are so many little tidbits that those of us who read books like this love these little Easter eggs that you put in there. One of the things that I love is just in passing, you mentioned one of the characters talks about being present when the Dalai Lama visited the Pope and what happened then.
Right.
And that's a real thing, I assume.
Well, yeah, I mean, I actually was with the Dalai Lama once with some other leaders in Dallas, and it was just such a bizarre scene. I mean, the guy was amazing, except he didn't really say much of anything. He just kind of sat and bowed his head and grunted. And I mean, he could have been, a Hong Kong tailor that somebody threw a sheet on, I mean, what was the deal with this guy? What's so great about him? But I know he's a really impressive guy. He just didn't really, he just grunted peace, hope, he just, and so my character, the Pope, goes into these moments of meditation, which drives everybody crazy. And so I think the passing comment you're talking about is when the Dalai Lama and the Pope were together, they nearly drove everybody else crazy because they just didn't say anything, So.
Yeah. And the thing I like about it is I like people that incorporate real things, which give them an extra dimension. Like the codex is a real codex you're talking about.
That's right. Yeah, it's the oldest version of the Bible in history that a real archaeologist, kind of an Indiana Jones German archaeologist named Konstantin von Tischendorf, I've always loved that name, discovered on his third trip to St. Catherine's Monastery at the foot of Mount Sinai in Egypt. And then he took it from the monks, saying he was going to take it to the Tsar of Russia and then he would bring it back, but he never brought it back. And they are still mad. All the descendants of those monks think he stole it, and he did actually. And then when the Tsar got it in the neck, the Bolsheviks said, what do we need with this old Bible? And they sold it to the British Museum in London in 1933 for £100,000. So I knew I wanted to have it stolen again now from the British Museum and go back through Russia to St. Catherine's Monastery. So that's one manuscript in the novel, and the other is the one that Adam Hunter has to deliver to the Vatican. So we have these two, a real manuscript and a fictional one. So.
Yeah. Fascinating too. And I've always been a fan of something that's coded. How do they do the decoding? What do they come up with it? And it's a fun little section there too as well. And how it comes up and how they relate to it and what they do with it. I just have the feeling that you're sitting there at the keyboard and you're giggling sometimes when you do this.
Yeah,
David probably heard me giggle a few times, right, David?
Oh, you giggle. And I just have this memory of back in Texas, he would work in what we called our TV room a lot because my mom had the office. And so he would just sort of take over the TV room because it was a big deal to have one computer in the 90s. So that was where the one computer was. And I just remember these big, like, oh, I got it, just like from the other end of the house, much more like big exclaiming than giggling. And it was so fun to watch these bursts of excitement, and he had to find one of us to tell us. And I get it because I'm the same way. I mean, my wife and I, we both write and we both do that to each other. We'll go find each other in the other part of the house to tell each other an idea we just came up with. It's a really fun thing, I think, because Stephen King has that thing of like, have a door you can close. And to a certain degree, you need to be alone to write. But if you live with other people who you trust and like, there's that added part where you share it with someone, like there's a million ways to write, right? So some people are like full on recluse and some people are like to include others. And I would say my dad's somewhere in the middle because he could zone out and be alone and write. But I think that there's a very human side of him that's like, wants to show it to somebody, I mean, my dad is a performer, he wrote and performed, and maybe performed is the wrong word, but there's some overlap there, 1,000 sermons in Texas, more than that, other place. And so that's, if you're a performer, you're used to getting in the moment feedback. Even if it's a pause, even if it's silent, even if it's an energy, it's not just laughs.
Yeah.
So I think any writer who's a performer, it has a hard time not wanting to show it to people. And
Yeah,
I just think it's so human. I think it's so human to want to connect and to hear what the person you trust thinks about it. It's very sweet.
Yeah, that's true, David, about the performing. I mean, I've spoken in 40 states
Yeah.
around the country and in a dozen foreign countries. And every time we had a service, we were on TV to 500,000 people all over Texas on the major ABC network. So I'm used to that, performing, but I'm also just an extrovert. That's how I met all these assassins. People say, "How did you meet assassins?" Well, I talk to people and I get them to talk, and one was a taxi
everywhere.
driver in Louisville, Kentucky, who had been in the Phoenix Project, and another one was an Israeli, who had Arafat in his sights twice, which is kind of hard to believe these days. And then a Russian who is a minister up in the Ural Mountains, was a mafia chief, a Russian mafia chief, killed people. But I just get people to talk, and then I listen and take notes. And, and by the way, one of the things, you were talking about the switch from nonfiction writing, which you do a lot of, Roger, to fiction. The biggest switch was I got to get to know characters, because good writing in fiction is about characters. If you don't care about the characters, why do you want to read this story? It may be a really cool plot, but you got to care about the characters. David knows this from theater and from movies and shows he's been on, and the characters he's created in his one-man shows that have been so successful. But the biggest surprise to me is I got to know my characters so well that they started talking to me. I would actually hear them say, "No, that's not the way I would say this." Or, "Yeah, I might do that, but here's probably what I would do in this situation, given the choice, because that's my nature, my character." And that was spooky. I mean, it was like I was hearing voices, kind of crazy, but it really helped me be able to open the story up. And I guess you probably noticed there were some surprises as you come to the end. But if you go back and reread it, Roger, or listen to David read it, you will hear little hints. You will see little hints I drop along the way. Oh, that's why this has turned out that way. If you go back, you'll see that.
Yeah. A lot of authors I talk to, probably 65, 70%, say that their characters will talk to them like that. And to me, that means you really know the character. You've got that firmly implanted. You have a little miniature version of the character in your mind who's talking to you, because you've got that well-rounded about that. What do you hope that when they close out the book or close out the audio book, what do they hope they take away with it?
Well, there are all kinds of, I tried not to be preachy in it. I tried just to tell a story, because I think that's important in fiction. But one of my hopes would be that, we are all a mix as human beings. There is good in every evil person and evil in every good one. So as opposed to a typical Tom Clancy novel where the Americans are all good guys and whoever are all the bad guys, I wanted people to understand how nuanced and broken and flawed we all are, given the crazy things going on in our world right now, wherever it is. We're all broken and flawed. And there is a possibility for peace if we understand that and actually listen to each other, listen to people with whom we disagree, which is not going on very much in this country right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I would hope.
Okay. David, I know you've got to leave soon for another engagement. Do you have any thoughts you want to make sure we get in?
Well, I just was thinking about that great question you just asked. And I think from my hope after someone listens to eight plus hours of my voice is that that they would want to listen to any other audiobook that I have encouraged them to continue engaging not just in audiobooks, but in the arts. I mean, I think every time I perform, I sort of think of myself as a torchbearer, you know, that people have been telling stories long before I came along and well, long after I do. But I have a responsibility to keep it good and interesting and have respect for the art, so that people keep experiencing art and wanting art created by humans and not AI. You know, there is a difference. And I don't think AI would get the vulnerability of character that humans can. You know, when my dad talks about you have to care about the characters, I think humans know how to write humans that are like humans.
All right.
I mean, maybe someday I will, and then our job will be very difficult. But yeah, I think I just think of myself as part of a kind of a large community of artists.
There you go.
And a continuum that started way back with Greek plays and, you know,
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
through
ab-
the Canterbury
absolutely.
Tales and all kinds of wonderful storytelling. And I want to mention, and David saw this in my novel, that this isn't just a beach read. It is fast-paced and it is entertaining, but there's literary depth. So that Adam Hunter, Adam in Hebrew means humanity, and he represents a violent humanity out of control in search of peace. And Rennie, whose name comes from Irene, which in Greek means peace, is the only one who can complete his mythic story. So that deeper literary thing is going on. It's also a little bit of Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces, where ordinary character, it's all the Luke Skywalker, you know, Star Wars, ordinary character has to leave ordinary world, go to extraordinary world, meets with mentor, meets with Yoda. In my case, it's Stump Stevens, who's a character a lot of people love, the first African-American CIA director. He's a fun character. And then he has to meet his shadow self. In Star Wars, it's Darth Vader. In Assassin's Manuscript, it's the Bedouin. So there's a lot of literary depth undergirding. I never really say that in the novel. The names actually mean something. Anastasia Palaiologos, the old Greek woman, means resurrection of the old word, which is what she's trying to get. Anyway, David recognized all that.
No, well, you work with a pro, you get pro results. I guess that's the only thing I can say. And I have to believe that, you know, 10 years from now when they're teaching this in history, that somebody will be watching this and go, there's my thesis right there. Boom. So I just wanted, is there anything final you want to add? Anything either one of you wanted before we wrap it up for today?
I just want to say it was really fun working with my son, David, our son, David, who, by the way, was born on my birthday, which wiped out my birthday at that point because he became the center of attention as a child. Yeah, his mother delivered him and looked at me and said, "Happy birthday. It's the best gift I've ever gotten." And here we are working together, which is, you know, long after I'm gone, this book will always still be there. Assassin's Manuscript and David's Audible version will still be there for people to listen to. I think that's pretty cool.
David, any final
Yeah.
thoughts?
I mean, an equal pleasure for me. You know, the added little behind the scenes thing is that about a year ago, I was in a terrible bicycle accident, and I'm lucky to be alive. And this was pretty much the first thing I could do after that. I mean, I got hit in April, and by June I was recording, and that, like, this was the side that was affected, 7 ribs and a clavicle. And just as soon as I could lift my hand to do use my mouse, I was in the recording studio recording. So it was very meaningful, not only to do this very cool thing with my dad, but to have it be one of the only things I could do, you know, while I was healing. And yeah, and then kind of work from this place of immense gratitude that I'm alive. There's a lot of vulnerability that comes out organically from that I now know. And maybe other people that have been through a kind of a near-death experience understand that kind of gratitude, but it's a visceral feeling. And so it's kind of fun to be able to use it as an artist, because it makes it feel a little less terrible that whatever trauma you went through, you can actually use it a little bit at least.
Yeah.
So check out Assassin's Manuscript with an amazing narration by David Carl, remarkable actor. And it may be, I don't know of any other, the only father-son author-narrator collaboration in the country. That's worth listening to on its own.
All right. Thank you very much. Our guests today, William Carl and David Carl. The book is Assassin's Manuscript. It is fantastic, highly recommended. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you. And
Thank
happy
you.
birthday again.
All right, thanks. Second, where's my, okay. So I'm going to put this together, do some post on it, and try to get it up on the internet this afternoon. Maybe
Great.
tomorrow,
Okay.
It's my birthday today. But
Yeah.
if you can give me, you trust me to give me an email address, I'll send you a link as soon as it goes up.
Okay. So mine is 311 Bill C, BILLC @gmail.com.
311 BILLC at Gmail.
Yep,
Okay. And then you can pass it on to David.
Yeah, because mine's complicated.
that's fine. I'll pass it on to David.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thanks so much, guys. You really made my day. I'm so happy to meet you both.
Thanks
It's
for
a real
having me on
pleasure.
your show. It
I
was
love
fun.
Take care.
you too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.